All right, boys and girls, it's finally time we give our review of the second half of the story of 2.4 and Wuthering Waves. And then I'll give a final review of the entirety of the 2.4 story as a whole. But I do want to let you guys know, if you're coming to this video and you have not finished the story, there's going to be massive spoilers in here because I'm going to be going over all the events and how they occurred as well as why they occurred, which involves me spoiling a number of details. So if that's you, pause this, put it on the watch later, go catch up and come back to this video. I also recommend some of you guys to go back and watch my previous 2.4 first half review to get good context on my perspectives of how things unfolded, or maybe you're a bit confused with this time-lapse paradox shit that's been occurring throughout the entirety of it and you're like, I need some clarification on this. I think that would help you a bit as well. Don't have to, just a suggestion. But that said, I'm going to be looking forward to breaking down these events, explaining my perspective similar to I did the first time, but also answering the questions that I think are significant, which I wrote down here. Why did Karthithia leave Septimont unannounced in the first place? That gets answered in here. Why was there an overlapping of Lupa and Mia the entire story? I think that's important to unveil for the viewer as well. What roles did all of the characters that participated in this story play? What was the significance of them? Cristoforo, Threnodian, Mia, Frolova, Bulling, the Rover, Lupa, all of these characters had significant roles in this story. In fact, the Rover wasn't the hero of this story alone. In fact, he couldn't even save Lupa without the help of Bulling, Frolova, and other external parties involved. So I look forward to breaking all this shit down with you guys. And then of course, at the end of it all, I'll explain my discontent with some of the story. I'll also explain what I enjoyed. The character development was my favorite part of it. And then of course, the overarching plot that transpired and what I look forward to going forward. That said, let's get to cooking. So this story starts off pretty much where you left off in the first half of 2.4. Remember, you won the Great Aegon tournament collectively with Lupa, and you got acknowledged by not only the Arsinosa, but the current F4 Augusta as well. This is the greatest form of praise and accomplishment that a Septimonian could possibly receive. A huge deal. In 2.4 second half, you pretty much pick up right there. You run into Lupa, she's excited to see you, and she immediately starts explaining to you kind of the tradition and rite of passage that a champion goes through following a feat such as that, which at that same time, Arsinosa pulls up. And I gotta say, on a side tangent, a goddamn centaur that big and large, a griffin, whatever you want to call that, that thing is too damn big to be pulling up like that, guys. Damn it, but it's a little bit unsettling. Speaking of which, though, another unsettling thing occurred. The Rover walks up to Arsinosa, puts his hand on her, and he immediately hears these outcries. And I'm gonna be honest, I was a bit confused going through the playthrough because I was like, hold on, what the hell is happening? Did something crazy just transpire? Then Arsinosa takes off on the fly, like just dips. Again, I'm a bit baffled when this happens the first time, but now I understand what actually occurred. The Arsinosa, which I already knew this, is the embodiment of the literal warriors that have died on the battlefield defending off tacit discords of Septimonia. It is the embodiment of pretty much death from warriors. So of course, anybody that touches this isn't just exclusive to the Rover having some special connection. Anybody that touches the Arsinosa is gonna hear those battle cries, which, thinking about that, it's a little bit morbid, don't you think? Guess what though? Septimonian people love that shit. It would be an honor for them to hear the battle cries of these predecessors of theirs that fought to defend off the tacit discords. And Lupa explains that to you. She then proceeds to tell you that going to the Veil of Glory, I believe is the name of it, is where champions will then proceed to do in tradition for Septimonians that win the Great Aegon to honor their fallen warriors. And so she convinces you that going there, you might come to appreciate something about the Septimonian culture. She's kind of concerned you're not interested, but little does she know, the Rover, to the contrary, is actually very interested in going. And that's because the source of the power that's been causing this anomaly, these indistinct frequencies that don't seem to be coherent with the real world, the answer to that resides at the Veil of Glory. He discovered it at that particular point. And what's interesting about this is he's not telling this to Lupa the entire time. Why is that? Well, if you remember the conversation we had with Frolova, she told him that if he were to warn her of any of this stuff, it would also trigger this chaotic event that would cause disaster. I also think another possibility is that he just is a bit skeptical that she's being fully corrupted and controlled by the Threnodian, and so he's like, I'm not telling this bitch shit. I actually kind of find this humorous because Rover kind of schizos out after this. Bro's like thinking about all the events. He's like, why can't I find Carthathea? Why is her essence attached to Lupa? They certainly cross paths. I know it for a fact. But Lupa said she's never seen her before. She's either lying to me or she's possessed by the Threnodian. The Threnodian's essence is attached to her. Maybe she's lying. This is all happening in his head. He's thinking about Forlova, what she told him. And then Lupa comes up to him a bit insecure. She's like, hey man, what's going on over there, bro? You looking a little funny. I decide to trust her and tell her everything. Why? Because she hasn't a single time throughout the entirety of the 2.4 story shown me that she's insincere. This girl has had maximum integrity and she's been sincere with pretty much everything. So if she was like duping my ass, you fooled me. Thankfully, my intuition was actually right and she came clean. She was like, you know what? You could be right. Maybe I did run into Carthathea. I just don't remember. I don't know. Maybe the Threnodian is corrupting my ass. But what I saw here, which is something I'm pretty sure a lot of anime fans saw, and I didn't catch it until the second time through, I'll be honest. There's an Easter egg of Attack on Titan. Sasagyo! And she does the whole little pose and everything, man. It was pretty cool seeing that. And there we have another overlap event. And this time we see Mia walking towards the Veil of Glory and she gets corrupted by the Threnodian. And in the same vein, she says, "You're from my homeland." Now, it doesn't show anybody in particular outside of the Rover himself, which it's not him she's talking to. And so now, looking back on it, I didn't think of anything at the time of the playthrough. But now I'm thinking, who was she referring to? There was clearly someone else there. I think it might have been somebody from the church order. Now, I can't prove this, but I just can't think who the hell else would be there decades ago, mind you. It's not Cristoforo. He's not from Septimont. It's not, it can't be Lupa. She was probably a little girl. Yeah, she was either a little girl or wasn't even born at that time. I just feel like it couldn't have been anybody but the church order. Now, once again, cannot prove that. Still cooking. Let's continue on. We get to the Veil of Glory and the Arsenosa pops up again. And then it goes to the wall and activates this little blue thingy majig on the wall. I don't know what it's called. Rover then walks up right next to her and activates that shit too. At the time, no earthly clue what the hell they were doing or how they were doing it. Now I understand that what was actually happening is they were fulfilling the two conditions required to access what's called the Central Hub, which, mind you, is also where the Imperator's final essence, I would say, resides. This is a condition that is later unveiled to us by the Threnodian herself, which we will get to that in the future. But I do want to say this is a very important part of the second half of 2.4 because it actually ties back into a theory I think holds true from 2.2 when we had a conversation with the Imperator. There's a lot of back and forth we got to go through as we get through this review, but bear these things in mind because I think it all makes sense when it's all said and done. Anyways, we finally enter the Central Hub, and this is where shit hits the fan. In fact, I was a bit confused. It all happened so fast. Lupa gets corrupted by the Threnodian. That's what it looks like. She throws a freaking spear at the hub. That's where the final essence of the Imperator is. It's black ooze comes out, engulfs the whole place. I'm like, oh my God, that's all she wrote, right? And I forgot, the Rizzler was there. Ain't no way the Rizzler about to let one of his waifus get corrupted. All jokes aside, she tries to go after Rover because she said he smells like Carthathea. I guess she can detect that essence on him as well. They do have that connection. And the Rover does something that kind of blows me away. He separates Threnodian from Lupa. I'm sitting here initially thinking, wait, this motherfucker can uncorrupt people now? I didn't know he could do that. But no, that's not what actually happened. You see, the reality of it was the Threnodian was just doing what it had been doing for stories on repeat, which is stealing Lupa's role. And this was just another story of the Threnodian taking the role of Lupa and then proceeding to get what it actually wanted, which was the Central Hub. However, Rover split the two apart using his ability, which I believe, correct me if I'm wrong in the comment section, This is an ability he acquired from the Imperator in 2.2 when they gave him a bit of his like gift back. And this ability allows him to split things, which is crazy because that's literally a power from the Imperator, whereas the Threnodian can assimilate to things. So I think that's what happened. That's why he was able to split the two apart. And then he proceeds to tell Lupa, I can't do this. You have to do this. Only you can do this. Change the fate of your own story by going inside of this book. Now, what I found fascinating about this is, first of all, this is the first time I see Frilova's value take place. That book is only in his possession because of Frilova, which means she indirectly, or I guess you could say even directly, it's indirect, helped Rover achieve this outcome. Now, why did she do that? Well, we don't know yet, but we're going to find that out, obviously, probably in the next update. But it can't be denied that she quite literally helped Rover against Cristoforo and his Forte abilities, which is quite interesting to me. Another one of the pivotal pieces of aiding the Rover in saving the day. Now, there's a few more interesting things that transpired here too. One, I didn't let it slip that Rover called Lupa warrior right before she went inside of the book. Why would he do that? Because she has been calling him warrior this entire time. I think that was the story or the writer's way of the Rover clarifying and dictating that she was going to be the protagonist of this story. And that's why he called her warrior. The final little thing I picked up on is Rover actually never told Lupa, technically, the warning of what can happen. She tried to tell him, what do you want me to do? And he said, read the book, right? That'll tell you. And then go off of your own intuition. And it reflects back to the conversation with Frilova saying that if you warn her, this destruction will still occur. And I think that was why he was so careful with his wording. I do think it's once again, a Lupa hole. I call it the loophole, the Lupa hole. It's kind of cringe. It's a bit of a cop out from the ultimatum, if I'm being completely honest. And the one thing that people have to understand is you'll get people defending this type of shit in this community. It's really fucking cringe. You got to understand that a writer can literally write cop-outs. That's kind of, at the end of the day, they're making all of this up. And so it's up to the writer to write in these cop-out things to avoid ultimatums, these Lupa holes. And speaking of which, Lupa going inside of this book to then experience her own main protagonist role thanks to the aid of Rover and the aid of Frilova is a loophole to that ultimatum, because now what ends up happening when we enter this book is Lupa now is going to steal back her role, claim the role of the new protagonist that she, well, I guess the original protagonist, which she always was, to avoid having to be killed. And so going into this new book is now a new direction. You have to kill the protagonist of this story, which is the Threnodian, who is just controlling Mia via possession bars. Now, when we get inside of this book, another pivotal piece to saving the day, the hero of the story, that's not just Rover, pops up. We see that Lupa is holding on to an object that was given to her by the Rover. But who gave the Rover this object? Bulling. That's right. Our cute, adorable little Taoist, who is best friends with one of my favorite characters in the game, Kung Fu Panda. Both of them are disciples of a master we have yet to meet, who I think is going to be the samurai guy. She is another reason the Rover and Lupa were able to get out of this unscathed, because this little piece that she gives to Lupa enables people to see the truth. It's called the Mirror of Truth. In this world, going inside of the Red Book, Lupa actually retained all of her past memories from different stories and so on and so forth. This is significant because it put things into perspective for me. I think of Summertime Rendering and ReZero. When they F up in the story, get killed or whatever the case, they start back over, they at least retain what happened, right? Lupa don't retain shit. Can you imagine how horrible that is, bro? You're going through this event where like doom is inevitable damn near. At least you can restart over. But the problem is you restart over and you just don't even remember what happened. It's like, damn, bro, you are cooked. So it's huge that she went into this Red Book and retained all the memories. She was finally able to like find her bearings and figure out what needed to be done. But while she's inside of here, another thing happens. It jumps back to a different timeline where she was with Kartathea. And it shows her almost fully corrupted by the Threnodian, getting ready to die. And Kartathea tells her you have to get back your role. Same thing that Rover told her. Furthermore, I'm going to give you a slither of my essence. I'm going to attach it to you. This will allow Rover to find you. Now, there was a bit of a cringe moment here, and it was pretty much insane amounts of glaze for the Rover, which I get it. He's the main protagonist of the story. But like, Carthathea was like, he saved me before I was going to take my own life, and I'm sure he will save you too. Don't worry. I was like, oh God, bro. Holy cringe. Some of y'all might love this, right? But you got to understand, boys, I've been around these anime parts for a very long time. So I've seen that infinite amounts of times. I've seen the Max Aura main pro tags. I'm so fucking over it. It's insane. I watched Eminence in the Shadow recently. Although I enjoyed it, the second season just turned into a straight full-blown slop fucking fest of slorp glorping the MC, constantly saving the day, constantly. I was like, oh my God, bro, this shit is boring. The story jumps back to where Lupa is, and she confirms that the reason Carthathea stayed behind in that story, and the reason Rover stayed behind in the story we were in, which is kind of the real world, is to give Lupa a fighting chance to take back her role as a protagonist. Because the way that this Forte circuit functions, if she doesn't take back the role, then bro's just gonna overlap the fictional world onto the real world and delete Lupa. Lupa gonna be lost to the goddamn Davy Jones locker at that point. And so they are giving her the chance to not only take back her role, but also avert the crisis and be the savior of the story, which I do think redeems the whole Rover saves the day. I love that because it's much more of a wholesome group effort as opposed to one guy doing everything. It like distributed the effort amongst Bulling, Frolova, Carthathea, and now Lupa as well. I'm not going to discredit that from the story. I thought that was beautifully done, at least to save us from the cringe Rover saves the day again type of ordeal. But this next part is the most important and intriguing parts of the entirety of 2.4 second half. Much like the Frolova bit in the first half, I would compare this to that element of the first half. So the past conversations that occurred between Cristoforo, Dominus Julia, Cristoforo, Frolova, and then Threnodian and Mia, which by the way, these were only possible thanks to Bulling's Mirror of Truth. This girl had so much to do with saving the day without even being on the screen. It was insane. But these conversations connected all the dots, answered all the questions. Starting off with Cristoforo and Dominus Julia's conversation, he tells us that Mia's fate was sealed the minute she won the Great Aegon tournament decades ago. Which, when I first heard this, I didn't know what the hell he was talking about. I thought he was just speaking in riddles and shit, you know? But then later on, a conversation occurs where he says, the central hub is the goal of the Threnodian, and it wanted to use Mia to gain access to that central hub. Once again, I'm still confused. What the hell does he mean by that? Then the conversation between the Threnodian and Mia happens, and she straight up comes clean and says, I need to use you to get access to that central hub. In order to enter the central hub, I need to have the Arsinosa and a champion that wins the Great Aegon tournament. So long as I have these two pieces, I can get to the central hub. Now, if we go back and reflect on when me, the Rover, and Arsinosa turn the blue thingies on the wall at the Veil of Glory, that is what the Threnodian was referring to. A champion that won and the Arsinosa can then open up that wall to gain access to the central hub. That's why Mia got killed by the Threnodian. And it's like unfortunate, right? Because she's from Raguna. She still has faith in the Sentinel. She was the only person that could have happened to, man. It's so unfortunate. Like, it really is, because the Threnodian said, oh, ding, ding, ding. We got somebody who not only won the tournament, they also got acknowledged by Arsinosa, and they're from Raguna. Boy, that's all three boxes. I'm corrupting the hell out that bitch. Like, it's so unfortunate how that happened, but that is why she was a target. Now, the other question you might be wondering is, why does she want to take over the central hub? Well, if she takes over the central hub, she can corrupt and bring the dark tide to all of Septimon, right? Because if you think about the first story, when Carthathea was fighting the corrupted Arsinosa, that was confirmation that she probably got access to that hub to then bring the dark tide to Septimon. So I think that was her goal, but then there was a separate thing that she didn't know about closer to the end of the story that we'll come back to. But I want to get back to my GOAT, Cristoforo. Hard carrying this story for me. Brother is a real villain, and he's got identity and purpose attached to his villainry. This guy wants to tell a wicked story at the expense of everyone. I mean, he just don't give a flying fuck, man. So let's get into it. So much was revealed through him. First of all, you can see how like sick in the head he is for a good story when you see his like passion and joy oozing out of him as he's describing the tragedy that occurred to Mia to Frelova. I mean, this dude just doesn't care about how fucked up the events that transpired for Mia occurred. He's more so excited about how that tragedy added to the overall story being told, which is crazy. But I also love it because I'm like, damn, bro, this motherfucker here. That's what we need. We need a motherfucker like him in this story, boys. We need some wickedness. And I also understand that he gets how tragedy adds to the value of storytelling, much like I try to tell a lot of people with Wuthering Waves storytelling. I wish they would listen to Cristoforo. Anyways, getting back on topic, some interesting dialogue occurs here. He says, you know, it wasn't so long ago that Rover intervened and Kartathea broke free from that tower. I thought this was crazy after looking back at it a second time through, because it comes off of it as if he's saying he had something to do with Kartathea being trapped into that inverted tower, especially when you come to unveil what this guy's ability is and what it can do. Keep in mind, Kartathea was trapped inside of an inverted tower inside of a sonorosphere. Cristoforo literally can create sonorospheres, and he takes past events and puts them inside of there. I mean, and they haven't truly fleshed out the extent of this dude's abilities, but what I know without like shadow of a doubt, he can create a sonorosphere. So when he says Rover intervened, does that mean that he had a hand in Kartathea being trapped in the tower? Because if he did, then he's more of a villain than you realize. He's been involved in this shit deeper than we've realized. This is not fact. I'm just saying, now that we know more about him, it's a possibility. If you continue reading, I discovered that a small piece of the Threnodian's essence within Mia was reawakened within the tower's resurgence into our world. Frelova responds, sounds as though you found a new inspiration. Again, the old inspiration might have had something to do with Kartathea being trapped inside that inverted tower. New inspiration means he can continue off of it now and continue to build off of it. Plus, he unveils that his real goal at the end of this all is to create a fictional reality and overlap it onto the current reality so that the Threnodian can get their powers back through that fictional reality and then be a part of the real reality with their powers fully back. So it's like this guy has always been about the Threnodian like causing chaos throughout the Renacita as a whole. And that falls in alignment with him being a part of the inverted tower scenario, because that was the real Threnodian trying to cause chaos. You see what I'm saying? Now that we understand his goal, you can kind of deduce from this how Lupa's role got stolen and her world got turned upside down. It was definitely due to Cristoforo's forte ability. He can create a sonorosphere, enabling the Threnodian to go in there, become a main protagonist through Mia, get her power back. But then there's still one problem. How do you actually manipulate reality itself? Because that's a whole different ballgame. I get the sonorosphere shit, but how do you manipulate reality? I think that's where the parallel identical events come into play. Cristoforo explained that there was a great Aegon coming up soon, and he was referring to the one Lupa participated in and won. He said before her death, Mia also attended a tournament. I'll use that as a fictitious anchor to craft a play to rewrite reality itself. This doesn't straight up say it, but it's kind of a giveaway that he needs a condition in order to manipulate actual reality. And that condition is, it has to be an identical event that has already transpired in the past. The identical event would be Mia also winning the Great Aegon tournament, getting acknowledged by Arsenosa, going to the Veil of Glory. Guess what? All three of those things happened with Lupa as well. Now the conditions have been fulfilled. He can now manipulate reality itself and start to dictate roles. I think this was how the role of Lupa got erased by Cristoforo, and he put in her place the Threnodian, which then enabled the Threnodian to jump to her story, steal her role, and put Lupa in this perpetual loop of doing the same story loop over and over and getting clapped. Now, why was she going through a loop? That would be the next question I would ask. I think this is another flaw of Cristoforo's power. He wants to overlap that other reality or fictional reality onto the main reality, right? And solidify it. But I think in order for that to actually happen, the events have to play through fully, like they have to complete. I think this is where Kartathea and Rover come into play. Right as he was trying to do it the first time, Kartathea got in the way and said, nope, nope, not today. And she clapped the corrupted Arsenosa inside of this like super dystopian realm and prevented that story from finishing. She like pretty much gate kept the last page of that story finishing. Then in the actual reality, Rover did the same thing, sent Lupa into the book to then get her role back. So I think they quite literally cock-blocked hard and prevented Cristoforo from fulfilling the final condition to then overlap that reality on there. Or, and this would really piss me off, Cristoforo simply didn't want to do it until the Threnodian got all their power back. Because he did say, once they get their power back, I'll then overlap them. There's no way though. That just doesn't make sense, and it's just a weak fucking like finish. It makes more sense to say he quite literally couldn't because the Rover and Kartathea got in the way of that actually happening. Regardless, this finally explains how all of that overlapping was occurring, why you would see Mia pop up in front of Lupa at times. It's because Lupa was getting deleted by the Threnodian thanks to the power of Cristoforo. A lot of the things that you were probably confused about make more sense now that these conversations were held in front of us, thanks to Bulling's Mirror of Truth. Now, with all of that understood, Lupa, of course, experiencing it in 4K, knows what she needs to do now, and that's defeat the Threnodian of this story. Once she does that, it'll collapse the Sonoro Sphere, return her back to reality, and at the same time, you start to see all the cinema unfold. You see her kicking ass, you see Rover defending off the Threnodian in the other story, and then you see Kartathea getting ready to attack Scar as well as Cristoforo himself, which was also later unveiled that Kartathea attacking Cristoforo prevented him from changing up the script further to prevent people to do what they want. If she wasn't fighting Cristoforo, then he could have actually manipulated the script in a way that still would have cooked everyone. His ability, I'll admit, is actually fucking broken. It's more broken than the Mangekyou Sharingan because, you know, his shit ain't no illusion. He can make it an actual reality. Furthermore, he can delete you out of your own story and put somebody else there. I'm like, this dude's ability is cracked, man. But I will say it's too many cop-outs of like good, well-written stories and characters, all for the sake of, oh, we all saved the day. And as I said, this is always going to compromise the integrity of good writing because, oh, we can't have nobody die and no, at least not anybody that really matters. Listen, guys, you know, you saved Shorekeeper because she's playable and you actually got attached to her. You saved Kartathea because she's playable and you actually got attached to her and they sold her to you. You saved Lupa because the exact same concept. You know why Mia died? Because you didn't get attached to her, you had empathy for her. You know why Sentinel died? You didn't get attached to the Sentinel, you had empathy for him. These aren't characters that actually are gonna like crush your soul if they die. That is why I believe they don't ever kill any of these characters. But as I told some ignorant moron in the story, criticizing my like want of tragedy and life being lost, why is life precious? Because there's a start and expiration date, right? Why is Itachi and Jiraiya the most beloved characters in Naruto? Because they died. That's why. Why does everybody love L from Death Note? Because he died, guys. Now, I'm not telling you that people that don't die don't become beloved characters. No, that's not what I'm saying at all. In fact, I shouldn't even have to say that, but for some idiots in there, I'm gonna have to say that because well, you saying that nobody else can be loved if they don't die? These guys are killing me. What I'm saying to you is there's a certain preciousness added to a story, a certain weight of love and attachment that you will have for a story due to the tragedy. Cristoforo would be able to explain it to you better than I could. But I digress. After all of this happens, one of my favorite things for this story does occur. And that is you get to see a heartwarming picture of Lupa, Kartathea, and Rover. Now, you might think of me as a cheeseball, and I actually am. And I am a bit of a romantic connoisseur, if you will. But that's not really anything to do with it. It's just that if anything at all, this story had very good character development. They carefully crafted a relationship between you and Lupa, the rover and Lupa, as they always do, but then they carefully crafted a relationship between Lupa and Cartathea as well, and how everything finished with her getting to meet both of them in real time. That was beautiful. It was actually quite sentimental, and I actually felt a bit of a heart warmth getting to see that picture. And so I really did love that. Apart from the Marvel finish, I thought that was wonderful. And I will say there's one more redeeming quality for them to pull the trigger, which I don't think they ever will. That is the Church and the Order is still the final remaining untied piece to this overarching plot of Renacida. They absolutely have a hand to play in here somewhere. We already figured out that Fenrico is most certainly a villain. We just need to figure out what the hell he been up to. I think he had something to do with Mia. I feel like that. That's just my hunch, tinfoil hat theory. And I think Cristoforo is, well, actually, we know Cristoforo is still colluding with Fenrico. And so there's still one more big plot that has yet to be solved and unveiled. I hope they kind of tie something in there where a bit of tragedy is lost, because otherwise you can't expect me to take a story serious that's trying to present me serious scenarios without actually having anything serious transpire. You see what I'm saying? A lot of people share this sentiment, not just me, many others. That said, I think it was a great story. My overall rating, you guys were expecting to hear from me from it, is going to be probably an 8 due to them not being able to pull the trigger, having too many cop-outs of tragedy actually occurring. Bypassing the ultimatum just because you're the writer doesn't excuse bypassing ultimatums and change. And this whole little like, oh, I said this, and actually, if you go back and look at Frolova, the sentence said that you changed it. Like, I don't want to know. No, man. We know that these are literally just loopholes for the writer to say we didn't have to do that. You know what I'm saying? So I give it an 8. If they actually followed through with some real consequence due to us breaking that ultimatum, especially with Rover actually helping and warning Lupa indirectly in a number of ways. He definitely was warning her, bro. He was holding the hell out of her hand throughout that shit. If that would have there would have been a bit more consequence here, then I would have definitely raised the score to closer to a 9. But I would say it was an 8. A lot of buildup that ultimately really led to nowhere. That's what I would say. I do want to comment on one more element that occurred, and this was me experiencing it the next day. It was the after stories. Oh man, those were so good. I can't believe those were too good to be side quests. Literal 12 out of 10 side quests. The connection with Lupa, first of all, the date, pure blown gooning, pure blown gathering wives after this good story being written. Now we can fulfill the cravings of the target demographic here. Let's give them a bit of a gooning sesh with Lupa. She got drunk. She wanted my schlong. She wanted my Johnson. She put her hand on my leg. Brother, you know she wanted back shots. We in the love chamber. Come on now, baby. Anyways, that was really nice. But the Cartathea one was even better because we got to see Cartathea unveil a bit more about herself. She said she had adoptive parents. I didn't expect that shit at all. And a whole sister. Oh my goodness. That was cute. Very sentimental. Even more character development. You know what would make it better? Kill Cartathea when we go back to the Church of Order. Would be masterful, brother. Holy shit, the whole community would fucking lose. Bro, the whole community would cancel Kudo after that. These pussies couldn't handle that one, boys. You know they couldn't. The other thing I liked was bullying. It was very short and sweet, but I'm glad we did at least go back to bullying because she had such a strong presence in the story. It would have pissed me off if we never did catch up with her again. But the final side quest, you were able to catch up with her. She was explaining herself just a little bit. I do feel like they kind of just threw that in there and rushed it. We needed more closure with bullying, more substance to her role because it was just so pivotal. But I appreciated these little side quests. I thought that was cool. And it was surprising to me too, how they threw that in there. That's going to wrap up my entirety of this review, my thoughts, this recap, if you will. My overall rating of the entirety of the 2.4 story, by Gacha standards, I'm going with a 9.5. By Gacha standards. By regular story told standards, I think we could stay at an 8. Yeah, I think we could stay at an 8. I would say that. Thanks for watching. Peace, love, and happiness. Holy Yap Fest. We didn't make it an hour this time. I'll catch you guys on the flip side.